Want to make a podcast? Spotify's got a platform that lets you make one super easily and then distribute it everywhere and even earn money, all in one place for free. It's called Spotify for Podcasters. Here's how it works. Spotify for Podcasters lets you record and edit podcasts right away from your phone or computer, so no matter what your setup is like, you can start creating today. Then you can distribute your podcast to Spotify, but also everywhere else podcasts are heard. Video podcasts are also available, and you can earn money in a variety of ways, including ads and podcast subscriptions. Did I mention it is totally free, no catch? I've been using Spotify for Podcasters since the very beginning of my show, and now we're nearing our 200th episode. So I can definitely say it's an easy platform, and I've really loved using it. So be sure to download the Spotify for Podcasters app or go to www.spotify.com/podcasters to get started. The Dental Download Podcast is your source for insight into dental school, conversations with dentists, specialists, and leaders in the industry. With new episodes every Monday morning, I'm your host, Haley Schultz. Let's get into this week's episode. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the Dental Download Podcast. So I'm actually not recording this intro real time like I do 99% of the time because I went to Louisville this weekend with 3 of our ASDA board members for my chapter at Michigan for the ASDA annual session, and I did not get back till late Sunday evening in that case, and I have a midterm the following day in oral surgery. So I knew that I would not have time to record this intro, and I wanted to make sure that I at least said hello to you and introduced our guest. Our guest this week is Mark Johnson, and we're going to talk all about student loans. So sit back, relax, and try to learn something new about your financial future and how to best work with a financial planner, when you should get started, what your options are for paying off your loans, what it really means to refinance loans. Those are all topics that we're going to cover in this week's episode, and I hope you find it useful. Okay, hello everyone. We have another guest here today, and we're going to be talking all about student loans. So I'm going to let Mark introduce himself and his background a little bit.
Thanks, Haley. Yeah, my name is Mark Johnson, and I'm a wealth advisor in St. Louis. I work with RBF Wealth Advisors. There's 7 investment professionals at the firm. We all have 25 plus years of experience, and been in the investment industry a little over 30 years. It'll be 31 years in February. And what we do is develop comprehensive financial plans for our clients, investment management, insurance planning. So the whole gamma, a 360-degree approach towards wealth management. And then in recent years, we've kind of developed some expertise in the student loan repayment planning area, specifically for dental professionals.
Great. And like we were talking about before we actually started recording, I feel like most of the dental students I interact with aren't too well versed when it comes to loan repayment options. So could you just break down some of the different strategies at a very broad level that there is for loan repayment?
Sure. So I'm going to assume that most of the listeners will have the bulk of their student loans in federal student loans. So you go through the financial aid office at school, and they let you know how much you're entitled to. So that's probably the bulk. There may also be some students that have picked up some private loans from maybe entities like Sallie Mae or Discover. Wells Fargo would be 3 of the big ones. And so there could be a combination, I guess is what I'm saying, between federal loans, probably the bulk of them, and then maybe some smaller private loans. And so let's talk for just a minute about the federal loan repayment options. So you have a 6-month grace period after you graduate. Now, this is obviously in the context of a normal environment. In the last 2 years, federal student loan payments and interest have been suspended as a result of COVID. President Biden recently extended the forbearance through May 1st. So right now, there's no payments and interest accruing on most federal student loans, but that's supposedly, they're going to turn that back on May the 1st. So for this year's graduating class of 2022, based on what we know today, they'll have a 6-month grace period. And at the end of that 6 months, if they don't do anything with their federal student loans, they're automatically going to be enrolled in a 10-year standard repayment plan. So if you got $400,000 in student loans, you're going to get an invoice in the mail for like $4,000 for your first payment. So most students are not equipped financially to handle that type of a payment right out of school. And so there's other options. There's what's called a standard graduated plan. And so that takes your student loans, extends them out as long as 25 years. You have a very small payment starting out, and it kind of ratchets up over time. And then a very, very popular program within the federal programs is called income-driven repayment. And there are 4 income-driven repayment plans, but only 2 really pertain to current graduates. That would be revised pay-as-you-earn or pay-as-you-earn. And each of those have some unique characteristics about them. I'll just make a quick plug for revised pay-as-you-earn. Revised pay-as-you-earn has a very significant interest subsidy or interest benefit. And if a graduate qualifies for that, they can get as much as 50% of their interest basically subsidized. And that's a pretty powerful tool, especially in the first year or 2 out of school. You're getting settled, maybe you have to relocate. And it's nice to see that, today's graduates are probably going to be graduating with an average interest rate on their federal student loans of maybe around 6.5%, something like that. And so, if you're able to get Uncle Sam to cover half of that, perhaps, or a good portion of that, maybe 30%, 40% in the first year, that could be very attractive. So for most graduates, again, looking at the federal student loans that they have, you have your standard graduated, or the 2 income-driven repayment plans, revised pay-as-you-earn or pay-as-you-earn. A couple other things on the income-driven repayment plans. Those plans they start out at 10% of your discretionary income. So a first-year dentist obviously is probably at their lowest pay that they'll be over their career. So you start out with a low payment, 10% of your discretionary income. You can extend those payments for as long as 20 or 25 years. If you still have a balance at the end, Uncle Sam will forgive the balance, but it's taxable income. So if, let's say you have $200,000 left at the end of 20 or 25 years, which is possible, depending on how much you started out with, Uncle Sam forgives that, but that $200,000 then would be added, that's forgiven, would be added to your taxable income in that year, maybe 20 or 25 years from now. So in our work with clients, we certainly do not want them to be making student loan payments until their first kid is coming out of, if you graduate from dental school and get married quickly and have your first child on an income-driven repayment plan, you might still be making college payments as your firstborn is graduating college, and that we don't think is a very good idea. So our goal is to help our clients figure out a plan to repay their student loans within 7 to 12 years of graduation.
So do you advise on investments as well, or is more so just where to put the money that they're going to be earning?
So we are a full service wealth advisory firm. And so we do investments, insurance planning. So we do disability, life insurance. We also do, retirement plans. So we work with clients probably starting in their 4th year of dental school, maybe 6 months from graduation, all the way through, let's say, my retirement in 20 years. So we have clients that we've been working with since they were D4s that are now practice owners, and we're helping them with their employee retirement plans as well as maybe business overhead expense insurance. So we kind of do it all. Where we've kind of carved out a niche, I would say, among wealth advisors, is that we've developed some expertise in student loan repayment planning. And so what's critically important, what we believe is critically important, is that borrowers or graduates think about their student loans in the context of an overall financial plan. Because if you're graduating with 300,000 or 400,000 or more, we have clients with 700,000, 800,000 in student loan debt. I just saw an article posted on one of the Facebook groups, dental Facebook groups I'm a member of, that said next year NYU is going to be $750,000, or a typical graduate starting next year, a D1 will graduate with about 750,000, of student loan debt. So that amount of debt is not going to be able to be dealt with in isolation from the other important financial planning matters. Most people graduating from dental school, maybe they're going to be married within a few years, want to buy a house, maybe need to upgrade your transportation, looking to buy a practice. All of those financial planning items are going to be impacted by how you approach your student loans. And so when we advise clients, one of my first questions is, well, tell me where you see your career going in the next 2 to 5 years. Because if someone says, I want to get very aggressive with paying down my student loan debt, I mean, the word aggressive could mean, one thing to someone and another thing to someone else. And so what I would want to know is, well, when you say aggressive, what does that mean? Do you want it paid off in 5 years, 10 years? Do you plan on being a practice owner? Because if you want to be a practice owner in 3 years, aggressively paying off student loan debt is going to impede your ability to do that. I actually was with a group of dental students last night in the great state of Tennessee, and one of the other vendors that was at the happy hour we hosted was a lender. And that lender said that they typically are looking for somewhere between 7 and 12% of liquidity when they lend money to a dentist who wants to buy a practice. So if somebody wants to be a practice owner in 2 or 3 years after graduation, if you get very aggressive with your student loans and you don't save any additional money elsewhere, you just pay down, put all your extra money towards your student loans. You walk into a bank to get a loan to buy a practice, you don't have 7 to 12% of the loan value in a liquid form, either in a savings account or an investment account that you have access to. You may or may not get that loan. And so we really try to put that plan together. You want to fund your Roth IRA, you want to get some disability and life insurance, all of those foundational financial planning items you want to take care of as you graduate. And you'll have plenty of time to pay off your student loans, and so finding that right balance between, paying down student loan debt and then addressing the other important financial planning issues in those first 2 or 3 years out of school is critical. And, in my humble opinion, the best strategy to repay your student loan debt is to become a practice owner as soon as possible. Practice owners make anywhere from 30 to 50% more than an associate even in a small practice. And if it's a larger practice, you can make a lot more. So we try to help our clients think through, the different strategies that might be appropriate for them given their career path, their anticipated career path.
Yeah, so it's definitely not a one size fits all plan. And that's why it's good to meet with professionals and figure out what makes sense for you.
Absolutely. Yeah. There is no one size fits all. That's for sure.
So another thing I always hear about is, when you graduate, you should try to refinance for a lower interest rate. Can you explain for people what refinancing is and how you could refinance, especially if you have federal loans?
Sure. So refinancing is simply you've got some federal student loans, or perhaps you've got some high interest private loans. And so all you're doing is you're going out and looking for a lender. Let's say your interest rates on your loans right now are 6.5%, and you're going out to look for a lender who might refinance your student loans. And let's say you have 300,000 right now at 6.5%, and they're going to lend you 300,000 at 4.5%. So you would save, 2% a year on a $300,000 balance, that's $6,000, at least in that first year of savings, just in interest. And so there's a number of companies out there that are interested in refinancing loans for dental students or dental graduates. Generally speaking, it's not a good idea the average dental student graduates today with a little over 300,000 in student loan debt. Some much more than that, depending on where you went to school. Generally speaking, I don't see it being a good idea to refinance immediately out of school, because what happens is these lenders are not going to. Some lenders will go out to 20 years, but most lenders, it's 15 years or less in terms of refinance. So on a $300,000 loan at 15 years, you're probably looking at a $3,000, $3,500 a month payment. And so again, most first-year dentists, I think the average income is $130,000. So if you're looking at living expenses, having a $3,000 payment right out of school is probably not. Most first-year graduates aren't going to have the ability to do that, maybe unless they're married and their spouse has a good income. And so typically what we see happening is graduates get on an income-driven repayment plan. They build up some emergency savings. They fund their Roth IRA that first year. Maybe they need to upgrade their transportation from school. Maybe they've been driving the same vehicle since undergrad and they need to upgrade a little bit. Hopefully they don't go out and buy a brand new Audi, but upgrade their transportation. And then maybe, 2 or 3 years after graduation, it might make sense to refinance. Now, if you have some private loans at 8 or 9%, then obviously it makes sense to maybe take a look at refinancing those right out of school. If you do have the financial ability, maybe you've got some help from family or you're married and your spouse has a good income, it does make sense to crunch the numbers and see if you can afford to do a private refinance, because right now interest rates are at like their all-time low. And so it could make sense if you can afford the payment. One thing I will say though is for those first year graduates, and maybe even after you've been out of school for 2 years, if you're on an income-driven repayment plan, depending on your situation, you and your loan balance, I referred to earlier on revised pay as you earn, you might be eligible for some interest subsidy or interest benefit on that income-driven repayment plan. So your effective interest rate isn't going to be 6.5%. It'll be something less than that. But you really do have to crunch the numbers. And, one thing I would say is that obviously borrowers are getting inundated by emails all the time from these private lenders, how much money you're going to save and isn't going to be, your life's going to be wonderful when you refinance, but you really have to crunch the numbers and see if it makes sense for you. And most first year dentists are not in a position financially to be swinging a $3,000 or $4,000 a month payment. And that's oftentimes going to be the case when you do a private refinance, just because, you might have 300 or 400, maybe 500,000 in student loan debt.
So you also mentioned before a little bit about residency. So dental students that are either entering into a general dentistry residency where they're making a smaller salary, $30,000, $40,000 a year. Is it advisable to defer your loan payments at that time because you're still in education, or do you think they should try to come up with a plan to be paying off a little bit at that point?
Great question. So first of all, I want to say you should always have a plan. Now, maybe that plan is I'm going to defer it during residency. But I would say that should have been a well thought out decision. Unfortunately, I think a lot of graduates that go on to residency just assume that the best approach, because maybe they're not going to be making a lot of money, like you said, somewhere between $30,000 to maybe even $50,000. I know some pediatric residency programs that pay, $50,000. So even though they're not going to be making a lot of money, they say, well, I can't afford to make that payment, and they don't even pursue it. Generally speaking, I think it's very wise to be enrolled in an income-driven repayment plan while you're in residency. So a couple of reasons. income driven repayment, as the name implies, is based on your income. So if you make $30,000 while you're in, if you make $30,000 while you're in residency, you're going to have a very, very low payment. If you are in a residency program that has, let's say your residency program's at a federally qualified health clinic that qualifies for public service loan forgiveness, okay, and maybe we can talk about that a little bit, but as you might know, public service loan forgiveness, you go work in a federally qualified health clinic for 10 years, you make 120 qualifying payments. Essentially what you're doing over that 10 years is you're just paying really the interest on your student loans. It's not quite that, but it works out to be about that. Okay, so you're making essentially the interest payment on your loans, and at the very tail end of that 10 years, that's all forgiven. Well, if you've got let's say pediatric dentistry, let's say you've got a 2-year residency program, that's 24 months that you could have knocked off of that 120-month commitment in public service loan if your residency is at a federally qualified health clinic. So that's one thing. The other thing is, let's say you make 30,000 is pretty low on a 1-year residency, but let's say you're going to make $40,000 in residency for a 1-year residency. Well, that's about a $200 a month payment on an income driven repayment plan for a single person. And so if you're going to be getting a $200 payment, if you're going to have to make a $200 payment, so $2,400, let's say you're on revised pay as you earn, and let's say that you have $400,000 of student loan debt at 6%. So that comes out to $2,000 a month of interest. Is my math right on that? Yes. So 400,000 times 6%, that's 24,000 divided by 12 is 2,000 a month in interest. If you're required to make a $200 payment, so you send in your $200 payment, there's $1,800 of interest left over. On the revised pay as you earn plan, Uncle Sam is going to pick up half of that 1,800. So it's just going to go away. It's going to vanish. And so instead of having your interest accruing at $2,000 a month while you're in residency, at least in that first year, after you made your $200 payment, Uncle Sam's going to pay $900 of your interest. So that's $7,200. So 900 times 12, right, is what, $8,100. And so is my math right on that? Let me just check it here. I've had a long day already. 900 times 12, 10,800. Okay, $10,800. That's going to save you $10,800. So would you make a $2,400 investment to get $10,800? Most people would say that's a pretty good investment. So can you scratch up $200 a month to make your payment to have $10,800 of your interest just vanish? I would say let's work on a financial plan and find that $200. So I strongly recommend that under most circumstances, clients or graduates in residency at least get enrolled in an income-driven repayment plan, or at least crunch the numbers and see if they qualify for something like I just described.
And this could be obvious, but I don't know it. Your income-based repayment plan, sorry, I got tongue twisted there. Income-based repayment plan is just based on your personal income, or does it include a spouse if you get married?
Great question. So if you're married on the revised pay as you earn plan, so that's one of the two that I've talked about today. On revised pay as you earn, it looks at household income. Okay. The other plan, pay as you earn, if you file your taxes separately, so you and your spouse file separately, on pay as you earn, the calculation will only be based on the borrower's or the person that's enrolled in the income-driven repayment plan, pay as you earn. Okay. So there are some nuances. And so oftentimes, so about 15% of the business that we do in this space is what I call redos. Someone got enrolled in a plan after graduation. Maybe they didn't seek professional advice. They talked to an unqualified party, a friend, a classmate, somebody who graduated last year, or who knows? They watch somebody on YouTube that maybe isn't qualified. Lots of sources out there for information. They got on the wrong plan, and then 2 or 3 years later, maybe they hear me on a podcast or find us, and then we go back and look at what they did, and they missed one little thing, like, oh, I didn't know I was supposed to file my. I'm married. I didn't know I was supposed to file our. We didn't know we were supposed to file our taxes separately, or I got on this revised pay as you earn, or I got on pay as you earn. My spouse wasn't working. Somebody said pay as you earn is only for married couples. Repay is for single people. I'm married. My spouse doesn't make that much money. They could have gone on repay and had a significant part of their interest subsidized, and they just didn't know that there was even any interest subsidy. And so the other thing I would say is that the loan servicers, so there's about 10 or 12 loan servicers that provide the customer service for everyone that has federal loans. They are not qualified to give advice on what someone should or shouldn't do in terms of their repayment. But oftentimes graduates or borrowers call the 1-800 number and they ask, questions. These folks on the other line, God bless them, they have a hard job to do, but they're not financial advisors. And they might, and so when someone's graduating with $300,000, $400,000, $500,000 of student loans, you don't want to be taking advice from a customer service person on the other end of the line. And I see oftentimes people get put into the wrong plan simply because they haven't invested any time in visiting with a qualified individual.
So I guess I'm wondering, let me figure out how to phrase this well, but the students basically, so they're graduating their fourth year, and when and how do they tell the government which not refinancing, which repayment plan they'd want to do? Or do you just I guess, how do you communicate that as to what plan you're going to follow?
So typically, I think it makes sense to start thinking about a plan at the same time you're looking for a job, or as you're applying for residency, or once you found out that you're going into a residency program, you've been accepted in a residency program, because your student loan repayment plan in the first instance is going to be contingent upon your income, right? Are you going to work in a federally qualified health clinic? Okay, so that's one path of planning. Are you going to work in a private, maybe a DSO or a private office, private practice? That's another path of planning. I visited with a young man last night, graduating from the University of Tennessee, and his intention is to buy a practice 6 months out of school. Well, that's a different track of planning. Are you going on to residency? That's a different track. So there's really, in my mind, 4 different tracks of planning that needs to take place. And you start developing that plan as you're looking for a job, maybe 3, 4, 5 months before graduation, or as soon as you know you're going to residency. So if you know you're being accepted into an orthodontic residency program, chances are you're not going to get paid, right? Orthodontics generally doesn't pay in residency. I think there's only a couple programs in the nation that do. GPRs, most do. AEGD, most do. Pediatrics, I'm sure they all do, or a large percentage of them do. And once you find out what your income is going to be, then you can start working on your plan. And so once you know what your income is going to be or what you're doing after graduation, you can start working on your plan. And then you can decide, do I want to, you've got that 6-month grace period after you graduate. Do I want to use my 6-month grace period before I tell the Department of Education through my loan servicer what plan I want? Or do I want to begin, like most public health, if you're going into public service loan forgiveness, you probably want to enroll in a plan immediately upon graduation. You don't want your 6-month grace period to get extended, because that's 6 months you could have been chipping away at your 120 months of qualified payments. And so usually, if you know what you're going to get paid, the 6-month grace period, that's just 6 more months of interest at full speed, right? So if you got $400,000 of student loan debt, if you just kick the can down the road and exhaust your full 6 months grace period, that's another $12,000 in interest under normal circumstances, right? Interest is turned off right now. So, there's some things where people say, oh, I don't have to do anything in residency. I can just defer my loans. Bad idea most of the time. Oh, I've got a 6 month grace period. I don't have to do anything for 6 months. Well, that's $12,000 of interest. And if you maybe had been enrolled at revised pay as you earn during those 6 months, let's say you got the maximum amount of uh, interest subsidy, which is up to 50%, that could have saved you $6,000. So, one of the encouragements that I would like to share with your listeners is procrastination is really expensive when it comes to student loans. Uh, Start working on a plan, a few months before graduation. Certainly, once you're going to residency, you've been accepted. That's the trigger to start working on a plan. And as soon as you start interviewing for jobs and you start getting some job offers, and you can look at, okay, what's my income going to be with this job? What's my income going to be here? Then once you kind of have an idea, I want to pursue, a for-profit employer, private practice, DSO, or I want to pursue a, federally qualified health clinic public service loan. Then you can start working on your plan.
Okay, that definitely clears it up for me. Thank you.
You bet.
So before we wrap up, is there any final advice you want to give to dental students or anything you feel is important that we didn't discuss today?
Thank you for the question. I think that people shouldn't be overly anxious about their student loan debt, and if they make wise choices on how they spend that student loan money while they're in dental school, they should be in good shape. So, don't take out more than you need. You're gonna have to pay that money back, and I understand that as a young 20 something in dental school, you've never had to work with two, three, $400,000. And so the impact of that when you graduate, a $3,000 or $4,000 a month payment is a significant amount of money. Okay. And so my first encouragement is don't take any more than you need. If you can stay away from private loans that have much higher interest rates, I would avoid, taking out private loans while you're in school to the extent that you can. If you can have a little bit of a side hustle, I know you guys are super, super busy, but any income that you can make while you're in, I've got a number of clients, and I have known a number of dental students that have had a little bit of a side hustle, during school, whether it's, DoorDash or whatever, any income that you can have. I would say that, don't use your student loans to go on spring break. That's not the intended use of those funds. Start thinking about, kind of the path that you want to go to, maybe in your third and fourth year. I would also say that, and this might be a little controversial, I'm not a dental professional, I'm a financial advisor. But for those people that are thinking about going on to a 1-year residency program, I would really crunch the numbers on that. And I would ensure that particular program has some metrics that you can look at to say, after I graduate from a 1-year residency program, I'm going to make X amount more than if I had just gone right out of dental school and started practicing dentistry. Sometimes I think, again, I'm not a dental professional, I'm just a financial advisor, but a 1-year residency program probably costs that resident $70,000 to $100,000 of income. So to take that amount of income, and let's say we could just invest that over at a 7% rate of return, $70,000 at 7%, money doubles every 10 years at 7%. So that first 10 years, that's 140,000, right? Or 70,000 is 140,000. Then it goes to 280. Then it goes to 560. And 40 years later, that turns out to be $1 million decision. So if you can't be convinced that you're going to make $1 million more going into a 1-year residency program, then I would really scratch my head. assuming all things are equal as to whether or not a 1-year residency program really makes sense. And so you have to make sure there's certain types of procedures that are high profit procedures, like implants and those types of things. And so maybe if you had a residency program that instructed you in some high end procedures that could really help your income right out of the gate after residency, then so be it. And again, I'm not talking about the other longer residency programs, but in my work, and we've worked with over 200 dental professionals and helping them build plans, I have personally not seen much additional income, at least in those first few years out of a 1-year residency program, as opposed to somebody just going straight into dentistry right out of dental school. I've got clients that have made $300,000, $400,000 in their first year or two out of dental school. And I have clients that are graduated from a residency program, 1-year residency program, that aren't making that much. So you have to really crunch the numbers when you make these decisions. I guess the other thing I would say is, don't take advice from unqualified parties. Everybody's willing to give you free advice, and free advice is usually worth about that. It's usually not worth a whole lot. And then when you think of your student loans, don't think of them in isolation from the other important things that you're going to have to contend with when you graduate. Maybe you're going to start a family. Maybe you're going to want to buy a house. Maybe you're going to be on track to buying a practice in a few years out of school. All of those other things are important. And in our view, the best way to approach that is in the context of an overall financial plan. So those are kind of my closing thoughts.
Yeah, that's great. And I think good thing to end the episode on. Hopefully some of those will really stick in people's minds as they go through their planning for the rest of literally their lives. This is important stuff we're discussing. So I appreciate your time. Before we wrap up, can you remind everyone of the company you work for, the resources you have, and how they could get in touch with you?
Sure. Thanks a lot. Yes. You can visit our website at studentloansrx.com. That's studentloansrx.com. We do offer a free 30-minute consultation. And so if any of your listeners we typically don't offer those until you're a D4. So if you're a D4 and you're looking to visit about your particular situation, we offer a free 30-minute Zoom consultation. You would just click on the free consult button on our website there. If you've got some unique circumstances, you're a D2 or a D3, you can click the button and we can exchange a couple emails to see if it makes sense to do a consultation at this time. But and then you can go to our resources page, and we have a number of dental oriented podcasts where we've been interviewed on that. And as soon as we're published, Haley has been very gracious to allow us to put this podcast on our website. We also have our full-length webinar. It's kind of a generic discussion on the topics we visited today. That's a little over an hour, so you want to get a soda and a bag of chips and listen to that. But we have some resources, and then also we do send out a newsletter. And so if you're interested in getting on our newsletter database, you can just send me an email at studentloansrx@rbfadvisors. That's R as in Robert, B as in boy, F as in Frank, advisors.net. And then I'll give you one more thing is you can also send me a secure text at 314-347-3499. Again, that number is 314-347-3499. And I really appreciate you having me on today. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much.